My wedding day felt like burying myself alive. There was no henna on my hands, no flowers in my hair, just trembling fingers fumbling with the buttons of a white dress shirt I'd never chosen. The mirror showed me a stranger, Kade Sullivan, 22 years old, broken, sold. This wasn't a wedding, this was a business transaction, and I was the cheapest item on the invoice. Kade, get down here right now. Mom's voice sliced through the silence from downstairs, sharp and eager. Her tone carried that specific excitement that only comes from seeing dollar signs. The Huxley family just pulled up, Thorne Huxley, a name that had stolen my entire life in one clean stroke. Self-made billionaire by 30. Ice-cold reputation. Ruthless in every business dealing. And now somehow my legal husband. I stared at my reflection. Hazel eyes that held no hope anymore. Just the terrible truth that I'd been auctioned off like livestock. My father's gambling debts had finally caught up with us, and instead of facing bankruptcy like a man, he'd sold his son. No discussion. No choice, just papers signed in back rooms while I slept. Unaware that my future was being traded away. I can't do this, I whispered to my reflection, voice cracking on the last word. But my voice just dissolved into the empty bedroom walls. There was nobody to hear me. Nobody who cared. My feelings were irrelevant now. Only the contract mattered. When I finally descended the stairs, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The drawing room had been transformed into some mockery of a ceremony space. White flowers everywhere, probably expensive ones, all paid for with money that had my name attached as collateral. And there he stood, Thorne Huxley. He wore a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my entire education. Sharp cheekbones. Stormy gray eyes that looked right through everything like polished glass. 6 feet of pure intimidation. And completely, utterly disinterested in the proceedings. He wasn't even looking at me. His attention was fixed on the window, watching traffic pass by as if this whole event was beneath his notice. My father grabbed my shoulder too tight, possessive, and shoved me forward like I was merchandise on display. This is Kay. Your husband. Thorne finally turned his head. One glance. Maybe 2 seconds total. Then his gaze shifted to the documents laid out on the mahogany table. Already losing interest. I assume you've read the terms. His voice was so cold it could frost glass. This is strictly a 2-year contract marriage. You'll reside in my penthouse. Adhere to my schedule, main public appearances when required. After 2 years, annulment. You leave with nothing. Crystal clear? My stomach twisted violently. I'd been holding on to this tiny, pathetic hope that maybe he was being forced into this too. That maybe we'd be 2 prisoners in the same cage, at least understanding each other's pain. But no, this was just another business deal for him. Emotionless. Transactional. I was a line item in his portfolio. Crystal clear, I managed to say, fighting to keep my voice steady. He slid the contract papers across the table toward me. Black pen already uncapped. Cold signatures awaiting mine. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. The weight of it felt enormous, like signing away my soul. My father stood behind me, breathing down my neck, making sure I went through with it. My mother was somewhere in the background, probably already calculating how she'd spend the money. I signed, one stroke after another. My name looked foreign on the page. Thorne signed without hesitation, his signature sharp and efficient. Then he checked his watch, actually checked his watch, like he had somewhere better to be, and looked at the lawyer who'd been standing silently in the corner. The transfer should be complete within the hour, Thorne said. Not to me, to the lawyer. I wasn't even worth direct communication. I'll have my driver bring him to the penthouse this evening. 6 o'clock sharp. I spoke up before I could stop myself. I have a name. Thorne's eyes cut to me for the 3rd time that day. This look lasted longer, maybe 5 full seconds. There was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Annoyance maybe, or surprise that I'd dared to speak. 6 o'clock Kade, he corrected, my name sounding clinical in his mouth. Don't be late. Then he was gone. Just walked out of my parents' house without another word, without any ceremony, like he'd just finished a routine meeting. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded final. I stood there in my white shirt and dress pants, legally married, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Well, my father said, clapping his hands together with false cheer. That went smoothly. You should go pack your things, son. New life waiting for you. New life. He said it like this was some kind of opportunity, some gift he'd given me. Not like he'd just sold me to clear his own mistakes. I climbed back up the stairs to my childhood bedroom and pulled out the only suitcase I owned. What do you pack when you're moving into a stranger's home? When that stranger is now your husband but looks at you like you're an inconvenience? I grabbed clothes, toiletries, a few books, the photograph of my grandmother, the only family member who'd ever really loved me, went into the side pocket. Everything I owned fit into one bag. Everything I was had been reduced to this. At exactly 6 o'clock, a black car pulled up outside. Professional driver in uniform. He took my suitcase without a word and held the door open. I looked back at the house one last time. My mother waved from the window, cheerful, relieved. My father had already disappeared, probably to the casino to make more debts with his newfound money. The drive across the city felt surreal. We moved from my modest neighborhood to the financial district, buildings getting taller and more imposing with every mile. Finally, we pulled up to a residential tower that scraped the sky, all glass and steel and wealth. The penthouse elevator required a keycard. The hallway on the top floor had exactly one door. I stood outside that door for a full minute, suitcase at my feet, trying to gather courage I didn't have. This was it. My new prison. My new life. I knocked. Thorne opened the door, still wearing his suit pants and white dress shirt, tie loosened now. Looking slightly more human but no less intimidating. You're punctual, he observed. Good. Bring your bag inside. I stepped over the threshold and the door closed behind me with that same final sounding click. My wedding day. The day I stopped belonging to myself and started belonging to a contract. The day I became Thorne Huxley's husband in name, his possession in practice, and absolutely nothing to him in reality. But I didn't know yet, couldn't have known, that this man who treated me like a business arrangement would eventually become the only person who made me feel truly, desperately, completely alive. Thorne's penthouse looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Not real life. Everything was minimalist, expensive, and completely devoid of personality. White walls, modern furniture with clean lines, abstract art that probably cost more than a car. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Beautiful. Empty. Like a showroom nobody actually lived in. Guest bedroom is down that hall, Thorne said, already walking toward what I assumed was his office. You can... Actually, he stopped mid-sentence, turning back to face me. No. That won't work. I stood there clutching my suitcase handle, confused. What won't work? You staying in the guest room? He crossed his arms, thinking. My housekeeper comes 3 times a week. She's observant. If she sees separate bedrooms, she'll talk. Staff always talk. My pulse jumped. So where do you want me to? The master suites. With me. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. But you said this was just an arrangement. I managed to say, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. You said, it is just an arrangement. Thorne interrupted, his tone sharp with barely concealed irritation. But appearances matter. My household staff doesn't need to know the details of our agreement. Neither does the media if they somehow get wind of this. So you'll share my bedroom. We'll maintain the illusion. Understood? I tightened my grip on my suitcase. And at night do we... Relax, Sullivan. He cut me off again. And I hated how he used my last name like we were business associates. I have zero interest in you that way. The room has a couch. You'll sleep there. I'll take the bed. Simple division of space. Nothing about this was simple. He led me down a hallway to double doors that opened into the master suite. The bedroom was massive, bigger than my entire childhood bedroom had been. A California king bed dominated the space, dressed in gray linens that probably had some ridiculous thread count. The windows here were even larger, showing the city lit up like a circuit board below us. And yes, in the corner there was a leather couch. My new bed for the next 2 years. Bathrooms through there, Thorne pointed. Closet space on the left side is yours. Stay out of my things on the right. I wake at 5:30, so try to be quiet in the mornings. Anything else? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness completely out of my voice. He studied me for a moment, like he was cataloging a new acquisition. Yes. Starting tomorrow, Here's how this works. You wake at 5:30, same as me. Breakfast prepared by 7 o'clock sharp. You'll accompany me to any social events where a spouse is expected, charity galas, business dinners, things like that. When we're home, stay out of my way. Don't touch my belongings. Don't ask personal questions. Keep your head down and we'll get through these 2 years with minimal friction. Clear? Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the humiliation of the entire day finally catching up. But I heard myself say, I'm not your employee. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Thorne closed his laptop with deliberate slowness, turned to face me fully. His gray eyes went sharp and dangerous. No, he said quietly, each word precisely enunciated. You're not an employee. You're my contract husband. And the money that secured this contract? Your family has already spent it. On what? I don't particularly care, but that money is gone. Which means you're here. Which means you'll follow my rules. Unless you'd prefer your parents end up on the street. Is that what you want? Rage and humiliation burned through my chest. But what could I say? He was right. I was trapped. My family had made sure of that. No, I whispered. That's not what I want. Then we understand each other. He turned back to his laptop. You can unpack. I have work to finish. I was dismissed. I took my suitcase to the closet, found the empty left side he'd mentioned, and hung up my modest wardrobe next to his rows of expensive suits. The contrast was almost funny. Almost. That first night, I made up the leather couch with a blanket I found in the closet. The leather was cold and uncomfortable, not meant for sleeping. Thorne worked on his laptop in bed, the blue screen light casting his features in harsh relief. The silence between us felt thick enough to choke on. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft clicking of his keyboard, wondering how I'd ended up here. 24 hours ago I'd been in my own bed, unaware my life was about to be sold. Now I was sleeping on a couch in a stranger's bedroom, legally bound to him for 2 years, expected to play the role of devoted husband while being treated like an inconvenience. Eventually Thorne turned off the laptop. The room went dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows. Good night, he said. Not warm, just acknowledgement that the day was ending. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning, my phone alarm went off at 5:15. I'd set it earlier than required, not wanting to risk being late. The couch had left my neck stiff and my back aching. I grabbed my clothes quietly and headed to the bathroom. When I emerged, showered and dressed, Thorne was already up, moving through his morning routine with mechanical efficiency. He barely glanced at me. I found my way to the kitchen, a chef's dream of stainless steel and marble. I opened the expensive refrigerator and found it well stocked. At least I had ingredients to work with. I made breakfast, scrambled eggs with herbs, whole grain toast, fresh pressed orange juice, coffee from his high-end espresso machine. I arranged everything on plates with care, making it look as good as it tasted. By 7 o'clock exactly, everything was ready. Thorne appeared at the dining table in a charcoal suit, hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the billionaire businessman. He sat down, glanced at the plate I'd set in front of him, then at me. You actually know how to cook, he observed. Not a compliment, just a statement of fact, like he was noting a useful skill in a new appliance. Yes, I said simply. He picked up his fork, took a bite, chewed methodically, swallowed, then continued eating in complete silence. No thank you, no acknowledgement of the efforts, just silent consumption of the meal. When he finished, he stood, grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. I thought he'd leave without another word, but he paused in the doorway. Dinner at 8 tonight, he said without turning around. I assume you can handle that too. Then he was gone. I stood alone in that enormous kitchen, dirty dishes in front of me, and understood completely. This was my new reality. I was live-in staff who slept on a couch and happened to have a marriage certificate with his name on it. But what I didn't know yet, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that these silent mornings, these cold exchanges, these careful distances we maintained would eventually crack wide open, revealing something neither of us had planned for, something that would change everything. 3 weeks passed in mechanical repetition. My life developed a rhythm that felt both numbing and suffocating. Wake at 5:15, shower quietly, make breakfast, watch Thorne eat in silence, clean up, spend the day alone in the penthouse while he worked, make dinner, eat separately, him at the dining table, me at the kitchen counter. Then the long evening hours where we existed in the same space but might as well have been on different planets. Him working on his laptop in bed, me trying to sleep on that damn couch. Repeat. I was a ghost in his life. Invisible. Convenient. The housekeeper Maria came on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She was kind, in her 50s, and completely believed we were a real couple. I played the part. Smiled when she asked how married life was treating me. Thanked her when she commented on how lucky Thorne was to have someone who took such good care of him. The lies tasted bitter but necessary. On Thursday of the third week, Thorne came home with unexpected news. There's a charity gala Saturday evening, he announced while eating the salmon I'd prepared. Tech industry event. I need you there. My first public appearance as his husband. My stomach knotted. What do I need to do? Look presentable. Stand next to me. Smile when spoken to. Don't say anything that could damage my reputation. He said it like he was briefing an employee. A suit will be delivered tomorrow. Wear it. Saturday arrived with a tight knot of anxiety in my chest. The suit that was delivered fit perfectly. Someone had clearly taken my measurements without me noticing, and cost more than anything I'd ever worn. Charcoal gray, impeccably tailored. I looked like I belonged in Thorne's world, even if I felt like an imposter. The gala was held at a historic hotel downtown. All marble columns and crystal chandeliers. Thorne's hand pressed against my lower back as we entered. The first time he'd deliberately touched me since that handshake at our wedding. It was for show, I knew. The cameras flashing near the entrance demanded it. But the warmth of his palm burned through my suit jacket anyway. Stay close, he murmured, so quietly only I could hear. And follow my lead. We moved through the crowd and I played my part. Smiled politely, shook hands with executives and their spouses. Let Thorne introduce me as my husband, Kay, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nobody seemed to question it. Why would they? We looked apart. Perfect couple, perfect lie. But then an older businessman cornered us. Drinks in hand, friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thorne, didn't expect to see you here with company. Last I heard, you were married to your work. His gaze slid to me with barely concealed curiosity. Where'd you find this one? The words stung. This one? Like I was a purchase. We met through family. Thorne responded smoothly, his hand moving from my back to my shoulder. Possessive. Sometimes the best connections are the ones closest to home. How convenient, the man said, his tone suggesting he didn't believe a word. Well, congratulations. Let's hope it lasts longer than most arrangements these days. After he walked away, I felt Thorne's hand tighten briefly on my shoulder. Ignore him. Robert's always been an ass. Does everyone think this is fake? I asked quietly. Thorne guided me toward a quieter corner. Does it matter what they think? I suppose not. We know the truth. Something flickered in his expression there and gone so quickly I almost missed it. Yes, we know the truth. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. By the time we returned to the penthouse, it was nearly midnight. I was exhausted from maintaining the perfect smile, from pretending to be something I wasn't. Thorne loosened his tie as soon as we walked through the door, that mask of the perfect businessman finally cracking slightly. You did well tonight. I stopped in the middle of taking off my jacket. Did I? Yes. You played the part convincingly. Several people asked me how long we'd been together. I told them 6 months. Keep that story straight if anyone asks you directly. 6 months? Another layer to the lie. Got it. I headed toward the bedroom, ready to change out of this costume and try to sleep on my terrible couch. But exhaustion had worn down my usual caution. As I was hanging up the expensive suit, I heard myself say, "Can I ask you something?" Thorne looked up from where he was checking his phone. What? Why did you agree to this? The marriage. You clearly don't need a spouse. You don't want one. So why? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, tax benefits. Business optics. My board was pressuring me about stability and commitment. A marriage certificate solved multiple problems efficiently. So I'm a solution to your problems, essentially. He met my eyes directly. Does that bother you? It should have. But I was too tired to pretend anymore. No more than being my family's solution to their debts. We're both being used. At least you're honest about it. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite softness, but maybe a degree less ice. Your family is that bad? My father gambles. My mother enables. I was just the collateral that eventually came due. I turned away, not wanting him to see how much saying it out loud hurt. But you know that already. It was probably in whatever background check you ran before signing the contract. It was, he admitted. Though reading it in a report is different from hearing you say it. Why does it make me more human to you? Less like a line item? Maybe. The honesty in that one word surprised me. That night, around 2 in the morning, I still couldn't sleep. The couch felt even more uncomfortable after the long evening. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the gala, all those false smiles, the weight of Thorne's hand on my back, the way he'd defended me to that rude businessman even though he didn't have to. I gave up on sleep and headed to the kitchen for water. Thorne was already there, wearing sweatpants and a plain t-shirt I'd never seen him in before. He looked different like this. Younger, more human, less like the ice-cold businessman and more like just a person. Can't sleep either? He asked. The couch isn't exactly comfortable. He leaned against the counter, studying me in the dim light from the under-cabinet LEDs. How long have you been waking up multiple times each night? How did you? I stopped. You've noticed? I'm a light sleeper. You shift around constantly. Sometimes you talk in your sleep. Embarrassment heated my face. Sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you. That's not. He sighed. Take the bed starting tomorrow. My heart jumped. What? The bed is large enough for 2 adults to sleep without interacting. You take the left side. I'll stay on the right. It's practical. You clearly need actual sleep. Thorne, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for you. He cut me off. But his tone lacked its usual sharp edge. I'm doing it because your constant movement is disrupting my sleep schedule. This solves the problem for both of us. Always practical. Always logical. But standing there in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, both of us too tired for usual defenses, it felt like something more than logistics. Okay? I agreed quietly. Thank you. He nodded. Get some water and go to bed. Tomorrow we're sharing space, not pretending one of us doesn't exist. As I filled my glass, I caught his reflection in the window. He was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not cold, not dismissive. Just considering. Like maybe he was finally seeing me as an actual person instead of an arrangement. Small crack in the ice. Barely visible. But there. And I found myself wondering what would happen if those cracks kept spreading. 3 months had passed since I'd moved into Thorne's penthouse. And something fundamental had shifted. He was different now. The cold, distant businessman, who'd barely acknowledged my existence, had been slowly replaced by someone who actually seemed to notice I was there. Morning routines that used to be silent now included actual conversation. Small things really. Did you sleep okay? Or this coffee is perfect, thanks. Or I have meetings until 8 tonight. But they meant the world to my touch-starved heart. I'd started to feel less like furniture and more like a person he shared space with. Thursday morning started normally enough. I woke before my alarm, made breakfast, set everything on the table at exactly 7 o'clock like clockwork. But when I turned to grab the coffee pot, the room tilted unexpectedly. I grabbed the counter to steady myself, my vision swimming. Something was very wrong. Kade, breakfast ready? Thorne called from the dining room, right on schedule. I forced myself to walk to the doorway, but my legs felt like they were made of rubber. The fever hit me all at once. Burning skin, body aching, weakness flooding through every limb. I'm really sorry, I managed to say, leaning heavily against the doorframe. Today I can't. Thorne looked up from his phone and his expression changed instantly. He was on his feet and crossing to me in 3 long strides. You're burning up, he said, pressing the back of his hand to my forehead. His touch was gentle, concerned, so different from the cold distance I'd grown used to. How long have you thought sick? Just woke up like this, I whispered. Speaking took effort. Bedroom. Right now. His tone left no room for argument. But you have that merger meeting at 9. Forget the meeting. He was already guiding me down the hall, his hand on my arm steadying me. Move. Carefully. He practically carried me to the bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. tucking them around me with surprising care. Then he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" I asked weakly. "Pharmacy. Don't move." He was back in less than 20 minutes, arms full of a pharmacy bag, medicine boxes, sports drinks, and bottled water. He'd gone himself, not sent someone, not called for delivery. He'd actually left the building and gotten these things personally. "You went yourself?" The surprise must have shown on my face. "Of course I did," he said matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Here, take these." He handed me fever medication and a bottle of water, watching carefully to make sure I swallowed the pills. Then he grabbed his phone and started typing rapidly. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Canceling my day. I'm staying here." "Thorne, you can't cancel everything for. Nothing matters more than making sure you don't get worse," he interrupted firmly. "So stop arguing and rest." My throat tightened with emotion I couldn't quite name. This man who'd treated me like a contract obligation for 3 months was now canceling business meetings to take care of me. He spent the entire day by my side. He tried to make soup from scratch. It was honestly terrible, way too salty and somehow both watery and burnt. But the effort behind it made my chest ache. He checked my temperature every hour, brought me water before I asked, and kept his laptop on the nightstand so he could work without leaving the room. "You don't have to do this," I said around mid-afternoon, when my fever had broken enough for me to think clearly. "Do what?" He didn't look up from his screen. "Stay. Take care of me." "I'm just what?" Now he looked at me, eyes sharp. "Just the person living in my home? Just someone I'm contractually obligated to keep alive?" I flinched at his words. His expression softened. "That came out wrong. What I mean is, you're not just anything, Kay." The way he said my name, gentle and almost careful, made my heart skip. By evening my fever had dropped to a low-grade temperature. I was coherent enough to be embarrassed by the whole situation. Thorne had closed his laptop and was just sitting there watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Can I ask you something?" I ventured, my voice still rough. "Go ahead. Why are you really doing all this?" He was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said slowly, carefully, "Because you're my responsibility." The word hit like cold water. "Just your responsibility? That's all this is?" His jaw tightened. Another pause. Then softer. "No. That's not all." My breathing stopped. "When this arrangement started, it was purely transactional," he continued, not quite meeting my eyes now. "A solution to problems on both sides. Clean, simple, emotionless. But you," he shook his head slightly, "you're not transactional. The way you take care of things without being asked. The way you exist in this space that used to feel like a museum. Your quiet presence. It's all real. And I don't know what to do with that." He finally looked at me directly and I saw something raw there. Something vulnerable. I built walls for good reasons. Kept people at arm's length because it was safer that way. But somehow you've gotten past them without even trying. And now when I come home and you're not in the kitchen, or when I wake up and you're not on your side of the bed, the penthouse feels wrong. Empty. My hands started trembling under the blankets. "Thorne, don't," he said quickly. "I know I'm terrible at this. Feelings were never my strong suit. Business, I understand, contracts and deals, and negotiations. But whatever this is becoming." He reached out hesitantly and touched my hand, barely more than a brush of fingers. "I'm trying to figure it out. And you being here, being you, it's made everything complicated in ways I didn't plan for." His touch was warm against my skin. "Do you hate it here?" he asked quietly. And for the first time since I'd met him, Thorne Huxley sounded uncertain, almost afraid of the answer. "No," I whispered truthfully. "At first, yes. I hated everything about this situation. But now, no. I don't hate it anymore." Something that might have been relief crossed his face. "Good. That's good." That night, we lay in bed with the lights off, the city glowing through the windows. For the first time since we'd started sharing the bed, neither of us built a pillow barrier between us. The space was still there, but it felt different now, less like a wall and more like a choice we were both making to keep that distance. Or not keep it. Thorne was closer than usual. I could hear his breathing, steady and calm. "Get some rest," he murmured into the darkness. "I'll be here." I closed my eyes, fever still making me feel floaty and disconnected, but for once I wasn't alone with it. For once someone was actually here, actually caring about whether I was okay. Maybe this arrangement had started as fake. Maybe the contract was still technically what bound us together. But the emotions building between us, the way my heart raced when he looked at me, the way he dropped everything to take care of me, those things were dangerously, impossibly real. And I was starting to realize I didn't want them to be fake anymore. The following Friday evening, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Thorne came home early, unusual for him. "Pack an overnight bag," he announced without preamble, already loosening his tie as he walked toward the bedroom. "We're leaving in an hour." I followed him, confused. "Leaving? Where are we going?" "It's a surprise." He glanced back at me with something that almost looked like a smile. "Trust me." An hour later we were in his car, him driving, which I'd never seen before, heading out of the city. He wouldn't answer my questions, just kept his eyes on the road while some jazz playlist hummed softly through the speakers. The drive took nearly 3 hours. The city gave way to suburbs, then to rural highways, and finally to mountain roads lined with pine trees. The air got colder, cleaner. When we finally pulled up to a small cabin nestled in the woods, surrounded by towering trees and complete silence, I understood why he'd been so secretive. "This is yours?" I asked, stepping out of the car and staring at the rustic cabin that looked like something from a postcard. "Yeah." He grabbed our bags from the trunk. "When the corporate world gets suffocating, this is where I disappear to. Nobody knows about it except my lawyer. I thought maybe you could use an escape too." My chest felt warm. He'd brought me to his private sanctuary, the place he kept hidden from everyone. That meant something. The cabin was simple but comfortable. Wooden beams, a stone fireplace, large windows overlooking the forest. It felt like a different world from the sterile penthouse. That weekend, everything changed. We hiked in the mornings, the mountain air crisp and clean. We cooked meals together. Thorne attempted pasta and managed to burn it so badly we had to throw it out and start over. Both of us laughing until our sides hurt. We talked. Really talked in ways we never had before. Saturday night, sitting by the fireplace with mugs of hot chocolate, Thorne told me about his father, a controlling, abusive man who'd made his childhood a nightmare. How he'd built his company from nothing just to prove he was worth more than the worthless son his father had always called him. How he'd learned to shut down emotionally, because showing feeling only gave people ammunition to hurt you. "I'm sorry you went through that," I said softly. "Nobody deserves that." "It made me who I am," he replied with a shrug. "For better or worse." "For better," I said firmly. "You survived. You succeeded despite him. That takes incredible strength." He looked at me for a long moment, firelight playing across his features. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "See the good even in the broken pieces." Sunday morning I told him my own story. How my parents had always treated me like a burden, a disappointment. How my father's gambling addiction had escalated over the years until everything collapsed. How I'd spent my whole life feeling like I existed to serve their needs, never my own. "I'm genuinely sorry," Thorne said, and the sincerity in his voice made my eyes burn. "For how this started between us. For treating you like you were just an inconvenience, another obligation. You deserved better than that. You were protecting yourself," I said, understanding it now in a way I hadn't before. "I get it." He reached out and took my hand, fingers intertwining with mine. The touch sent electricity up my arm. We sat there like that, hands clasped, the morning sun streaming through the windows, and I felt something click into place in my chest. I was falling for him. Completely. Irrevocably. Sunday night we sat on the wooden porch, under a sky absolutely packed with stars. More stars than I'd ever seen in my life. The silence between us was comfortable now, companionable. "Kade," Thorne said suddenly, his voice serious enough to make my stomach drop. "I need to tell you something." Here it comes, I thought. He's gonna say this was a mistake. We're going back to the way things were. "The contract expires in 18 months, he continued, staring out at the darkness. "But I don't want it to." My heart stopped. "I know this is complicated. We started as complete strangers forced into an arrangement neither of us wanted. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger. You became the person who makes that cold penthouse feel like somewhere I actually want to be." And He turned to look at me directly. I think I'm falling for you. Actually falling, not pretending for appearances. Tears pricked my eyes. Thorne. You make everything feel real, he said, words coming faster now like he'd been holding them back for too long. Your laugh, your cooking, the way you hum when you're concentrating, how you read books everywhere. All of it, I want this to be real. If you want that too, if I haven't completely ruined any chance. I reached up and cupped his face with both hands, cutting off his rambling. I want that. God, I want that so much. His eyes searched mine. Yeah? Yeah. Then he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid I might pull away. But I didn't. I pressed closer, pouring 3 months of longing and confusion and unexpected feelings into that kiss. He responded by pulling me against him, deepening the kiss until I was breathless and dizzy and completely utterly alive. Our first real kiss. Our first genuine moment of intimacy. And it felt like everything I'd been missing my entire life. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thorne rested his forehead against mine. Stay with me, not because of the contract, not because of money or obligations, just stay. Always, I whispered. Monday morning, we drove back to the city in comfortable silence, his hand resting on my thigh the entire drive. I felt lighter than I had in years, like something heavy I'd been carrying had finally been set down. Then my phone rang, Dad's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Kate, you need to end this contract immediately, my father said without preamble, his voice aggressive and demanding. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Thorne's business rival approached me. Offered double what Thorne paid to marry you instead. Divorce Thorne. You marry this new guy next week. Papers are already drawn up. The entire world tilted. Absolutely not. I'm not doing that. You don't have a choice. Remember? You never did. This is happening whether you like it or not. I hung up on him, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. What's wrong? Thorne asked immediately, glancing over from the driver's seat. I told him everything, words tumbling out between gasps as panic set in. My father's call, the rival offer, the demand that I divorce him and marry someone else like I was property to be traded. Thorne pulled the car over to the shoulder and turned to me, gripping my shoulders firmly. Listen to me. You're not going anywhere. Do you hear me? I don't care what your father says or what he thinks he can force you to do. You're staying with me and we're going to fight this. Together, I promise you. But were promises enough? When my toxic family was determined to tear us apart for money, I didn't know. All I knew was that I loved him deeply, completely, terrifyingly, and I was ready to fight for that love even if it meant going to war with my own blood. My father's harassment started immediately. The calls came constantly. Morning, afternoon, middle of the night, threatening messages piled up in my voicemail. You're destroying this family with your selfishness. Thorne is manipulating you. Can't you see that? This new deal is our only chance to stay afloat and you're ruining everything. But for the first time in my life I stood firm. I'm not leaving Thorne, I told my father during one particularly vicious call. This is my life. My choice. For once I get to decide what happens to me. He hung up on me with a string of curses. 3 days later, the bomb dropped. I was making breakfast when my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Social media mentions. News alerts. My hands went numb as I opened the first link. Billionaire Thorne Huxley's marriage exposed, contract fraud or love story. The article had everything. Photos of the original contract with the dollar amounts barely blurred out. Quotes from anonymous family sources. Obviously my father, detailing how I'd been sold to clear gambling debts. Speculation about whether our relationship was real or just an elaborate business scheme. The comments section was vicious. Gold digger. He married for money. Poor Thorne getting scammed. Fake marriage exposed. I felt like I was going to be sick. Thorne found me sitting on the kitchen floor, phone in my shaking hands, tears streaming down my face. He took one look at the screen and immediately pulled me against his chest. Don't read those, he said firmly. They don't know anything about us. About what's real. But your reputation, I choked out. Your company, your board, everything I've destroyed. Stop. He tilted my chin up, forcing me to look at him. My reputation means nothing compared to you. Do you understand? Nothing. Let them talk. Let them speculate. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. But it wasn't that simple. By noon, the story had gone national. Business news channels were running segments. Social media had turned us into a trending topic. Reporters were gathering outside the building. That evening, Thorne made a decision. I'm calling a press conference, he announced. Tomorrow morning. Love broadcast. Thorne. No. Yes. I'm not hiding. I'm not letting them control the narrative. We're going to tell our story. The real one. The next morning I watched from backstage as Thorne stood at a podium in front of dozens of cameras and reporters. He looked calm, professional, completely in control. Thank you all for coming, he began. I'm aware of the stories circulating about my marriage to Kade Sullivan. And yes, I'm here to address them directly. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. It's true that my marriage began as a contractual arrangement, Thorne continued, his voice steady and clear. 2 years, specific terms, business reasons on my side. But here's what those articles don't tell you. Contracts are just paper. They expire. They end. But feelings? Those are real. Those last. He paused, looking directly into the camera. Kade is not a business transaction to me. He's not a contract or an arrangement or a publicity stunt. He's my partner, my husband, and I love him, genuinely, completely, without reservation. Tears blurred my vision as I watched him. I don't care what people think about how we started, Thorne said, his voice growing stronger. All I care about is where we are now and where we're going. And I'm choosing Kade. Openly. Proudly. Because he's the only person who's ever made me feel like my life is more than just work and obligations. He makes me feel alive. A stage manager gestured to me. He wants you out there. I walked onto the stage on trembling legs. Every camera swung toward me. Thorne immediately reached for my hand. Gripping it tight. I love you, he said. And this time it wasn't for the cameras. It was just for me. Said in front of the whole world, but meant only for us. Whatever happens, whatever that's not changing. I love you too, I said. My voice breaking. Tears falling freely now. He kissed me right there. In front of everyone. Cameras flashing. Reporters shouting questions. And I didn't care. None of it mattered except this us. Together. Choosing each other. The backlash was immediate and intense. But so was the support. People who'd been through similar situations reached out. LGBTQ pause. Advocacy groups released statements. Some of Thorne's business contacts dropped him. But others doubled down on their support. My father tried calling one more time. I blocked his number. 2 months later, we stood in a small garden venue with 20 carefully selected friends. No family. No press. No contracts. Just us and vows that actually meant something. Kade Sullivan, Thorne said, holding both my hands, his voice thick with emotion. You're not just my husband. You're my home. The place I feel safe. The person who taught me that feeling things isn't weakness. It's strength. I promise to fight every battle beside you, to choose you every single day and to never take for granted what we have. My turn. I took a shaky breath. Thorne Huxley, you gave me back my choice when everyone else had taken it away. You saw me when I felt invisible. You made me feel alive when I was just existing. I promise to choose you, to stand with you, to love you not because a contract says I should but because you're the best decision I've ever made. We exchanged new rings, simple platinum bands engraved with the date we'd gone to the cabin, when everything had changed. When we kissed, it felt like time stopped. Like the whole universe paused to acknowledge this moment, this choice, this love. Our honeymoon was at the mountain cabin. Of course it was. The place where we'd first been honest with each other. Where we'd first admitted what was growing between us. Happy? Thorne asked. Arms wrapped around me as we sat on the porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Happier than I ever thought possible. I said honestly, you know what the strangest part is? I'm grateful for how it started. Because it led me here. To you. I was thinking the same thing, he admitted. If someone had told me a year ago that a contract marriage would turn into the most real thing in my life, I would have laughed. But here we are. Here we are. I echoed, turning in his arms to kiss him. We'd started as strangers forced together by money and desperation, two people who didn't want this, didn't choose it, resented every moment. But somewhere between the silent breakfasts and the shared bed, between the charity gala and the fever-induced confessions, between the mountain cabin and the press conference, we'd built something real. Not a marriage on paper, a marriage in our hearts. And that made all the difference.